So right before I clicked the live button, I went, because I was just like, I just noticed it turned 4 o'clock. Hi, everybody. It is another Friday, and this Friday at 4 p.m. has turned into a DU reel. It's not always going to be that way. Sometimes Jackie and I have our side quest that we'll go on, but today the side quest has brought us here, and I am glad for it. Happy motherfucking Friday, Jackie. I'm glad to be here and chatting with you.
Woo woo! Happy Friday, motherfuckers! What's up? Yeah, sorry about last week, you guys. I could explain, but uncertainty happens and it's okay. I'm here this week and I'm happy to be here, like you said. Um, I love when my now includes Amanda and all of y'all joining us in the chat. And yeah, we were just sort of talking about the myth of being a good person or being a bad person, like the myth of being able to categorize people in general. And our minds like inherently work in this dualistic way where like if I'm me, you have to be you. If I'm good, you have to be bad, right? It's always in comparison, and like we perceive that comparison or difference as being in conflict, and we do so many mental gymnastics trying to maintain our idea of who we are as a good person and everyone else as whatever we need to see them as to maintain our idea of ourselves and our perception of the world. And yeah, we were just saying how like there are certain beliefs present within at least the United States, where people will hold like let's say you're very religious and also very pro-capitalist at the same time. There are certain people I know who are like that, and it's like, how do you not see the way that those beliefs are in conflict with each other? But if you're raised within a system where that is normal, and you believe yourself to be just this thing, and you are in, you need to uphold your self-esteem and value your own identity because you just think you're this one person separate from everyone and everything else. You're gonna continue to believe that shit and think divisively and maintain this cognitive dissonance that inherently, I think it makes it hard to act empathetically because you want to believe yourself to be a good person, so much so that you can't recognize when you're doing things that are harmful and destructive and not living up to those morals that you claim to hold so highly. So yeah, that's where we're starting off today. We're kicking today. I had a Vietnamese coffee before this, so I'm feeling like like
Down with the system. No, 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 no. Just like, feeling a little disheartened, right? Because I had a few meetings at work today, and we're talking about like our DEIB committees, our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and talking about certain partnerships with other organizations and other businesses that are trying to leverage their resources to make an impact on at-risk communities. And as they're talking about like reviewing the way that we do things and how we may be able to, and this is like an example that they gave us, it's like you may be able to assess that you're paying 20% of your employees less than a livable wage, right? And instead of having to pay them more, what you can do is leverage, and I am paraphrasing, not a quote word for word, but you can offset some of that unlivable wage that you're paying your employees by offering programs that help alleviate the cost for housing and childcare and food. Three things that tend to cost people a lot of money. And it just like broke my heart a little bit that like we skip over paying people more. Like Like, I know that that would be difficult, and I know that that would, not be pleasant for everybody else who, let's say you're able to pay that, like in this example, you're going to pay that 20% of your employees that you determine you're not paying a livable wage. And instead of coming up with 15 programs to help make that unlivable wage somehow livable, you could just pay them more. And then you don't have to come up with all these programs that help with housing and food costs and this, that, and the other. And and I'm looking up like the statistics, and there's been an increase of 61% of productivity for hourly based pay. And while that productivity has gone up 61% since 1979, the hourly pay has only increased by 17.5%. Mind blowing, right? The widening pay gap is showing that for the top 1% of earners, they've experienced a 179.3% increase in wages since 1979. So 1% of the people that are working in this country saw a 179% increase. And the bottom 90% have only seen a 28.2% increase in pay since 1979. And the sources for this information is the Pew Research Center, the Michigan Journal of Economics, and the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So, definitely look up this information yourself. But it's like it's clear. It's clear that productivity has gone up. The quality of our life has gone up slightly. So we're working better, we're working more efficiently, but you're not getting paid for that. But somebody's getting paid for that, and it's not the majority of the workers who are doing that work. And it's just mind blowing that like we skip over just paying people a livable wage. Like that's just like, oh no, we don't want to make the top 1% or the CEOs or the executive leadership teams, we don't want to make them feel bad. And we also don't want to hurt the bottom line, but we're going to come up with these programs, and it's like, but not like, it's just like there just doesn't seem to be as much incentive to just pay workers more, and not even more because they're not doing anything. Like they're clearly working better and more efficiently, and they're not being compensated for that. And it's amazing because not everybody thinks this way, right? There's a credit card company in Seattle, and I want to say his name is like what the hell's his name? Dan Price. And he did something like 7 or 8 years ago where he took a pay cut, and he took about $1 million pay cut so that all of his employees could get paid a minimum of $70,000 a year. And so many people were criticizing him. So many experts on Wall Street were saying that his business was going to fail. They are thriving. They are killing it. They are doing an amazing job. So many of the employees have been able to buy houses, have been able to have kids because they feel confident in their financial ability to take care of those children that they're giving birth to, and they feel confident buying that house and being able to pay that mortgage in 5, 10, 15 years and maybe pay it off in their lifetime. But it's because the CEO actually prioritized his people. He didn't say it, he did it. And so when we talk about all these committees and all these programs and all this, it's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, are you actually taking care of people, or are you just making a very public attempt to?
Yeah, you just want the narrative to be that you care about your people and that you're supporting them as much as you can, but that is not as much as you actually can support your people. And that's such an amazing example. And to the CEO, that's nothing. Like they already are comfortable. And for a lot of CEOs, like think about fucking Jeff Bezos. Like you do not need billions of dollars. Like you could survive, like give me $1 million, I'm set, I'm good for life. Like, that's even more than you would need to sustain yourself for a lifetime comfortably, right? Maybe not. I don't know. I don't really know, to be honest with you. But it's definitely not hundreds of billions of dollars. Um, and yeah, you're right. It doesn't make any sense why they wouldn't see that as being a viable option. But yeah, at the end of the day, like this country works as like a corporation, and corporations are very inhumane structures in a way. They're like machines. And yeah, unfortunately, the way that this system is running and what's good for business and for the people that are running these companies has taken priority, and it's also seeped into our government so that it's become easier to do that. And then these corporations can lobby politicians, right? And sway and like pull the strings with the law and like, get out of taxes and like all of this shit. And it's crazy that that's what we're prioritizing over the well-being of the citizens of, like our people. Like we are whatever country we're a part of. We are whatever company we're a part of. Like they would be nothing without every single person that's contributing to it, right? And the like growing wealth gap reminded me like of I don't know, I'm seeing hoarding wealth as like if you imagine certain organs in the body were hoarding blood. Like that's like a blood clot. You do not want a fucking blood clot, bitch. Just no, like because then certain organs begin to die off and it eventually will kill the whole organism. And that's kind of like what we're seeing now. Like in the world, certain people are doing really well, but certain people are fucking starving and like living in really horrible conditions. And it doesn't need to be that way. I think the whole of society would be better off and we would actually be more civilized and advanced and like embodying the values that we claim to hold, at least speaking from the perspective of the United States, right? Like the values of, personal liberty and like independence and like freedom of opportunity. Like that's really not a thing anymore. And it's funny, like freedom of religion too. Like this is such a Christian fucking country. And it's like seeping into our politics too. And it's like, how do y'all not see that? But it's because a lot of people are holding on to these contradictory beliefs and like not thinking through them all the way. Like you need to be able to question your government, your religion, your beliefs in general, your management, like, and that questioning will eventually produce change. The more of us are doing that. But it is such a shame that we've gotten so far away from reality and like community and genuinely caring about each other and seeing the way that we're connected. Like we're just so fucking individualist these days that like we don't think that other people doing well is good for us. But it is. Like we're inherently connected, and just like that company in Seattle where like if everybody like baseline needs are met, everybody benefits because everybody's willing to work harder, they're more loyal, they're willing to stay in that role. They want to grow with the company because they feel like they're valued and they're compensated fairly. Like that's how people become like detached and complacent and, just doing the bare minimum at work. And it's actually bad for business and bad for like our progress as a species, like when people are just being passive and doing what they're told because they're just seeing the job as like, okay, well, I need money to fucking survive. Like if you cover that basic need, then people can actually give a fuck about what they're doing.
It's funny because like in certain corporate settings that I've been a part of, the boss is really quick to ask if you could do more. Can you do more? Can you stay later? You want to take on this project? And I was like, and I have learned the hard way to say, thank you so much for presenting me with this opportunity. Does taking on more responsibility also come with a pay increase? I'm certainly open to doing more. Are you open to paying more? Usually that's, that's at least reminding your bosses and your employers that we're not opposed to working hard. that's not a problem. It's getting screwed over that we don't want to accept. It's having 5 jobs and getting paid for half of one, like, and then, they want to, so many times I've seen, and it's not always like this, but so many times I've seen, people getting underpaid and then getting criticized for not being willing to die for the job. And I'm like, how does that make any sense that you want to pay the bare minimum, but you want people to be the most invested? You want people to be broke like an entrepreneur with a startup company, but have none of the incentive of being that entrepreneur who just happens to get paid nothing, but they are an owner and they're investing in this. And so, working countless hours for bare minimum pennies is okay for 2 years, because in the long term, the plan is for you to build a business that maybe you sell later, or you sell stocks, or like, it just seems so disheartening that, it seems like a surprise. And then when you bring this back to your bosses, in my experience, they're like, oh, I'm so surprised, the company is really strapped for cash. And I was like, yeah, but it's not strapped for asking for favors. So, like, what the fuck, man? It shouldn't be a surprise that that employees will want to be compensated for the work and the time and the effort and the commitments that they sell to the employer. But it's just, you get criticized for sticking up for yourself. And in today's economy, it's so hard for you to just walk away from a job entirely. you know um, when you have so many other considerations. Like, I have been lucky enough that when I have quit a job without having another job in line, I felt like I could take that risk because I don't have any kids and I don't have any pets and I don't have any college debt, right? So I don't have any of the big debt buckets, which, sorry to say it, like, I consider kids like a debt bucket, because, like, as meaningful as it can be to be a parent, it is expensive. And a lot of people go into debt for the children that they are raising, and they are putting things on credit cards and they're borrowing money that they can't pay back. And it's just, it is not a cheap thing to be a parent. And so, because I don't have those other considerations, I feel like I can move a little more freely. And if I have to eat ramen for 2 months, it doesn't matter, because I'm not making a kid eat ramen for 2 months with me. We're not barely eating and barely, doing things. Like, I'm putting myself through that because I'm like, fuck it. Like, we don't have a job. I guess we're going to be eating hot dog and ramen for 2 months. Like, it's okay that I put myself through that. But if I had a kid, I imagine that, I wouldn't be so quick to just quit a job because I don't want to deal with the politics, or I don't want to deal with the wage to labor ratio, you know? But when you have those considerations, it feels like it's a lot harder to make those pivots. And so that's why it's just a little disheartening to go to these committee meetings and to be a part of these conferences. And they talk about leveraging resources, but the one thing that they tend to avoid talking about is just paying people more. But they don't have a problem paying their CEOs more. They don't have a problem paying their vice presidents more. And it just seems like they're not so blind to that. Like, I don't think it's completely oblivious. I feel like, to some degree, they know exactly what they're doing, and so do we. And when you spend the little bit of money that you have, it's like, maybe we should think a little bit more about how we're spending it. Instead of buying another laundry detergent from Tide or whoever, anyone, maybe you consider making a remedy at home. But then, like, some people don't have access to computers, so it's like, okay, maybe you go to the library and you research recipes. But it just feels like it's so much on the individual to find a way to not be dependent on this larger system that has been grooming them to lean on the system. And it just feels like there's so much responsibility on the individual, on the consumer, to not get fucking screwed over. And it's just straight up bullshit. And so I am feeling a little disheartened after the meetings that I went to. But I also feel motivated that, like, we are changing that by having this conversation, by bringing these concerns up. And we are a part of not maintaining that system, at least when we question it.
Yeah, the only thing that's perpetuating this system is our unwillingness to question. because we're the ones that are perpetuating it. Like, we're the ones that day in and day out are going to work and, buy, like you said, like buying from the companies we've always bought from because, and it's not our fault. Like, specifically me, Jackie, it's not my fault, but like me as a whole, like, I need to take responsibility for this mess that we've made because our priorities have been all out of whack. It's just been about, you know, progress and more for the individual. Like you said, very individualist. And it's crazy, like, all of the conditioning we go through, like in school, learning to be, deferring to an authority and, being told what you can do and when and how to do things specifically. So, like, making it harder for you to think for yourself and trust yourself, right? Because now there's like a right way to be. And then there's this whole narrative of, okay, well, you go through school, then you go to college, and then you meet somebody, and then once you're like 30 and you get married and you have a kid, and like then you're parents and you work for the same company for 40 years and then you retire because that's the American dream. And you have a big house and a fancy car and all new appliances, and your kids have all the presents they want under the Christmas tree. Like, this is what we are taught, and like, at least in my experience, this was like what was ingrained. And it's not even in it's in very subtle ways, like through media or just like the way that our schooling system is structured. I don't know exactly, but it really warps our perception of what matters. And in terms of like businesses prioritizing their CEOs and like their investors, right? And like making sure that they're happy. It's so counterintuitive because you would think the people that are leading the company would care more about the company and the cause, right? Or the product or the service and like the people that are helping them make their vision a reality, right? You would think that they would want to give back and like do as much as they could to like make sure that everyone under them is taken care of. But no, like, it's so normalized to pursue your own interests. And like there have been conversations I've had with people close to me where I'm like, but it just doesn't make sense for anyone to be a billionaire. Like, nobody needs to be a billionaire. That's like, why do you need that much money? For what? You can't spend all that money. Why do you need it? You insecure piece of shit. Like, you need it just to like be able to sleep at night, like to look in the mirror and not hate yourself, because I bet you still hate yourself no matter, because that's a endless fucking pit of despair when you think that like the external circumstances determine your worth. And yeah, and there can be such cognitive dissonance because to me that's so glaringly obvious. But the argument I've heard a lot is like, well, like, they made the company, right? Like, they deserve, they worked hard. They created something. They deserve to be they can make as much money as they want, right? And I'm like, but it doesn't make sense at all. And it's like, I just always remember that like study that found that after, a certain amount of money where you're able to just sustain yourself and live and like not worry about bills, like happiness doesn't increase the more that you get. And so like it just doesn't make sense from either perspective of the CEO or from their employees for that to be the case. But we just can't see that if we're hell-bent on believing that the way we've always done things is the right way and that we're at the peak of human progress, and that it would be too much to change the system now. It's too big of an issue. So we could just do nothing about it. Like, this is just the way things are. That's so frustrating to me. Like, at least acknowledge that it's fucked up and illogical, right? Like, are you just not, you just aren't willing to think about it?
Yeah, what came to mind when you were talking was just about, like money doesn't buy happiness, but it does buy distractions. And so like that's my spin on that saying, because it feels like, money does buy you, it buys you distractions, and it buys you um access to resources, and not struggling for resources feels great. It feels good to know that at any point, no matter what goes wrong, you could pay to solve, to get over whatever barrier you encounter. Like, but for you to have that benefit at the expense of all of fucking humanity just seems like 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 a conversation a conversation can be had, right? And no one needs to have fault for that conversation. And I said this the other day in one of our patreons, in the comment section. Oh, no, it was during the guys, I think one of their live. And it was that disagreement doesn't require conflict. So to disagree with you about how we have collectively, individually prioritized certain things doesn't mean that I'm asking for anybody to claim fault, or for myself to admit, like, I messed up or anybody messed up. And it's just like, but I don't agree with how we're doing things. And by not agreeing, I'm not blaming. But in so many times, when you disagree with somebody, they think that you are mad at them, that you hate them, that you're judging them. Or if they disagree with you, they worry that you think that they're judging you, or that they're unhappy with you. And I've seen people in conversations and in the comments saying, they're like, oh, I disagree, but I don't want you guys to think that like I hate you. And it's like, I don't know if you knew this, but I wasn't looking for a full-time ass kisser. Last time I checked, man. So like, you do not have to agree with everything that I say. You do not have to agree with anything that anybody says, in the same way that nobody has to agree with you. And by not agreeing with you, I'm not tearing you down. I'm attempting to have a conversation that feels uncomfortable for me too, because I know that I am contributing to this world, to this collective struggle, right? So it doesn't feel comfortable for me to bring up things about how our priorities are out of whack, because I'm included in the hour. I don't know if you knew that. Like, and then I start to sound like I'm annoyed, but it's like I am annoyed that like when I try to bring up this conversation, that people are like, "Oh, I had no idea. You had no idea. You didn't see the fucking flames. You didn't see shit blowing up in smoke. Like, no, had no idea, huh?" And it's that cognitive dissonance. It's like, to admit that they saw it, or to admit, means that they also admit to doing nothing about it. And it's like, yeah, but I did nothing about it. I'm still, sometimes feeling like I do nothing about it. Like, that doesn't matter how I feel. Like, I still think that despite feeling uncomfortable, I'd rather have a conversation where we talk about everything on the table, including the ways that I individually contribute and how we collectively contribute to the shit pile. That the stench is becoming over fucking whelming. And so, I'm tired of pouring, perfume on the shit pile to say that it smells better, or to wonder, what could we do with that shit pile? Maybe we could bury it. Maybe we could set it on fire. And it's like, yeah, but where's the shit coming from? How about we just find the source of the shit, instead of talking about how to reorganize the shit pile in 15 committees? Like, it just seems like we like running in circles, because running in circles makes you feel better, makes you feel like a good person. I'm a good person. I do my part. It's like, yeah, but let's talk about how we do that part, because we could all do things differently. And that doesn't mean that anybody's taking fault by being open to do things differently. It just feels like, a lot of these conversations are not being had in an authentic way, because too many people are protecting their feelings instead of being open to finding the best solution, not just the solution that works best for them.
Yeah, at this point, we're just slapping band-aids on all over the place to this system that's broken and struggling and crawling along and is obviously flawed, and that we're all suffering as a result of. And yet Like, we can do all of these things to sort of like make it okay-ish for the time being, like to make things a little better without looking at, like you said, the root of the problem. And I think that's how we approach a lot of issues, like in general. Um, like even in our lives, like when you think about mental health and like that whole issue, right? And there's this whole mental health epidemic, and we don't want to look at why that is. We just want to be like, okay, well, no, there's something wrong with you, and we'll give you a pill, and then you can keep working, right? Like just slapping on a band-aid. And that's what we're doing when we're coming up with all these committees, like all of these like workarounds to just rethinking how we structure and how we work together. Like we're still relying on like a constitution from fucking 200 years ago when they didn't even have technology. Like think about how different the context we're working with is today. And yet we're still using these dated ass systems that clearly aren't working for the vast majority of people. And yet people don't want to have that conversation. Yeah, I think it's also the fact that we just see ourselves as these limited beings, and we think we're going to only live for 100 years, right? So it's like we can just make it livable and okay until I die, and then I don't really give a fuck about what happens after that. Because we just have this idea that we're just the individual that we are. But yeah, it doesn't make sense when you just are able to recognize not even that, we're all one and all of that shit, but that we're dependent on each other. Like even that, then you're like, okay, well, it makes sense to like take care of people and make it easier for them to live. And that's why we created government in the first place, right? To like organize, protect the peace, and have it benefit the people. And yet now it's like only benefiting very specific people with money. So yeah, and it's crazy. One thing I thought about too when we're talking about like how people get trapped in this, it's not even like trapped in this system. Like that's what it can feel like sometimes, where like, you have all this student debt. Your job isn't paying you enough and gaslighting you, right? When you're working, they're expecting you to work and give and be this person who grinds, right? And is like motivated and intrinsically motivated, right? They like see that as a value and gaslight you to think that you shouldn't be paid more for it. You're like, "Oh, well, if you really cared, then you would be willing to pay for it, or then you would be willing to work this hard." And it's just insane that the gap between like the cost of living and what people are making has gotten like crazy far apart. And it does not make sense. And then also nowadays, like Roe v. Wade got fucking overturned. And so now people, especially in states where abortion is illegal and they're limiting access to contraception, people are going to, and they're also not teaching people about birth control and safe sex because of religious beliefs. And then people are having kids that they're not ready for, they can't support. And then the cost of having a baby in a hospital is it could be like hundreds of thousands of dollars if you don't have insurance. Insanely expensive. So you go into debt for having the kid, not to mention the cost of feeding and clothing and buying them all these things that is now like like having a kid is a huge money suck. Kids are so fucking expensive. And there's no support, right? There's not maternity leave. Like there is, but not long enough at all. There's not free childcare. And then if you have your baby and give it up to the system, they're mistreated and those kids are not taken care of at all. So it's like you don't even genuinely care about the children. You just care about your fake fucking morality and upholding these ideals without actually embodying them. And yeah, people can't look at this whole clusterfuck of a situation because it just seems so big. And it does. It definitely does. I look at this situation and I'm like, what could I, wow, like that's a lot. But when you think about it, like it's not just, we are not our limited lifetimes, right? Like we are part of this whole, like we created all of this, our consciousness, right? Our existence became this and it can change. And when you think about how long eternity is, like this is just a blip and we could turn things around and live completely differently, theoretically. Like all of that is possible, but not until we accept that it is, not until we're willing to look at it and have that fucking conversation. So, yeah, you can look at that and really be depressed and be like, wow, well, there's no hope. But also, Ray just said giant meteor 2024. Yeah, there could be a mass extinction event, and I don't know. I think it can only, there's only that existential doom when you are thinking of yourself just as an individual and you're afraid of dying, or, you know, all of these things that we perceive to be bad or uncomfortable, or like, you know, when we think about that, it seems like a bad thing. But from the perspective of the universe, which is the reality of me, it's just one possibility playing out. So yeah, even if we do get hit by a giant meteor and all fucking go extinct, like the dinosaurs, were around for millions of years. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but they were around for a long ass time and they got obliterated. And there have been multiple mass extinction events throughout the history of the earth. And when you think about how old the universe is, like that's just the span of the earth and like our sun and our galaxy. But there's literally billions of galaxies and like we are so small and insignificant. But like the shit that we worry about is so narrow-minded and so limited in terms of like time scale. Like I love that, you know, I forget which Native American tribe like thought of all their decisions in terms of how it would play out for 4 generations. Like that, if we thought that way, that would change so much about the way that we worked. Oh my god, dinosaurs existed for 165 million years. That's fucking crazy. And then they got absolutely demolished and all that was left was like sharks and birds. But yeah, if a meteor could do all that to the dinosaurs, like we are so fragile. And
Yeah, but most in my opinion, most people would vote for the meteor to wipe us all out than take responsibility. That is in my opinion. You like be responsible and considerate of others or wipe us all out with a meteor. I vote meteor. Like I feel like that is where a lot of people would consider themselves like, you know what, fuck it, it's just gonna be too hard to change. And it's like nothing is impossible. You know, with enough time, something that seems impossible is then, you know, options present themselves or options get created. And so I definitely resonated when you're talking about just like how, you know, women are having certain trouble, you know, accessing healthcare, but it's not just women, and it's you know, I don't want to get rid of the billionaires and the millionaires that we have. I just by not prioritizing money, I am helping to create an environment that doesn't hopefully make another millionaire, not because they don't have access to infinite amount of money to be made, but because they don't fucking want to make it. So that's where my mindset is right now. Is I'm not trying to eliminate groups or take options away from people. I just don't prioritize certain things the way that I used to. And by not prioritizing money over people, by not prioritizing excess over, just having what I need, um, I show others, I show myself that I don't need to have the biggest house. I don't need to have a bank account with $1 million. And I don't need to have enough food in my basement to survive a fucking apocalypse. Like, I don't need any of those things. And I can still have a very meaningful life. And I because I could still be the billionaire, and I could all of a sudden develop a rare disease and I keel over. I could have the doomsday basement or base full of all my resources, and I trip over a rock and snap my neck. Like, you know, we do all these things to try to delay or reduce uncertainty, and there is no guarantee that we could ever give ourselves that will delay whatever it is that we fear, whether it's being homeless or being poor or being or starving or fighting somebody over a can of fucking green beans in a zombie apocalypse. Like, you can't avoid that shit, man. Like, as much as you can try to, there is no way that you could guarantee yourself that your nightmare won't come true. I don't care what your nightmare is. There's no way that you could do anything that could guarantee that you will never experience that with which you fear. So, like, what are you gonna do? You could panic, or we could just not give a fuck about those things that we fear as much, and just make do. I don't need to have an excess of money, because let's say we have that bank account, right? The bank itself could close, could go out of business. And if you don't have a certain minimum amount of money in the bank, then you're not insured by the federal government to get like reimbursed to some degree. And the dollar itself could become that, like, meaningless, right? So you have these millions of dollars, and then all of a sudden your form of currency is just meaningless, right? So all those hours you spent hoarding wealth or hoarding food or hoarding opportunity, like, isn't foolproof, right? And so I think that although having lots of money feels great and can certainly be useful when you're adapting to what's happening around you, but there's no such thing as a foolproof plan. And so I think just admitting that is something that you can do. It's something that I tell myself, like, as much as I plan, the best laid plan is great until the first thing goes wrong. And then it's all shit, because you make a plan based on assumptions, and there's no way that you could ever accurately assume the next fucking hour, let alone the next 5, 10, 15 years for yourself as an individual or for us as collectively. But it's just I still think that, you know, how I prioritize things, how I spend my time, how I value money and access and opportunities, how I do all of that is hopefully showing myself and other people that there isn't just one way. And even if it doesn't always make sense, and even if it doesn't always feel pleasant, like it just, like, that doesn't matter. I'm not looking to always feel great, and I'm not looking to always feel certain or happy or pleasant. Like, my life is still meaningful even when I have a crummy day, even when I feel heartbroken because I just went to work, and work just reminded me that, our priorities are not the most empathetic, for the examples that I saw. As much as I felt heartbroken, I also felt motivated, like, yeah, but I only feel heartbroken because I'm invested in not doing that. And that, to me, is enough to explore where I do want to do things and why I want to do things. Am I looking to be a hero? Am I looking to get credit for these things? Am I looking to embody, consideration for everyone? Because Man, I love the analogy you gave with like the body, you know, right? And so I'm watching like toes die off and turn black because where the blood is getting hoarded into certain sections. And I'm like, fuck, man, like this is a lot. There's a lot of places that I'm seeing like turning black and about to die off. And it's like, okay, well, I can still, where can I move blood? Where can I where can I share access? Where can I do that? Because even if I don't save a whole foot, you know, it's still worth it to me to just not replicate the template that I was given.
Yeah, what you said right there reminded me of this psychological phenomenon called the bystander effect, which is like when you're in public, let's say, and something happens, right? And people are like, "Oh, should we?" Like people can see something happening, like let's say, like somebody is making somebody else really uncomfortable or like following them or harassing them, right? And there's people around, everybody will look around and kind of be like, well, somebody else will do something, right? And then nobody will actually do anything. And so we sort of like pass off the buck because the problem is so obvious, and that's kind of like what we are doing collectively. I sort of just now made that connection of like we're seeing all these things happening and we're like, well, somebody should be doing something about this. The people with more resources should be doing something about this, and we don't want to look at like what we could do. We don't want to think that we're complicit in whatever it is, but also like we don't want to have to take responsibility and take action, because fundamentally we're focused on ourselves and what's most convenient and makes us feel good. So, yeah, we're watching parts of the body die off and being like, well, I just go to work at my job and like this is just the way things are, and like I'm just trying to survive, man. Like I'm just trying to make it through the day, and like we don't really want to sit back and look at our own priorities or the way we might be contributing to these issues, or even just being willing to question these systems and talk about it, cuz all of that is doing way more than we think, and the change is already happening. 100%. Like definitely my generation, like my peers are looking at capitalist structures and the government right now and is like, this all needs to crumble to the ground. And there are some people I know that are very much like, well, fuck, I just hope the world ends so that I don't have to keep going to work. Like it's such like a it's like laying down and rolling over when you when you see a problem, right? And just like allowing yourself to be a victim. But in reality, making yourself into victim is just a lack of taking responsibility.
Mhm. And the
Yeah.
system is crumbling, right? I was chatting with a friend a few weeks ago, and we're chatting about like the system and how some people are doing really well and some people are struggling, and how we ourselves, like me, I am just trying to get by. I'm just trying to, not be homeless, have enough to pay for my food, I have enough to go to the movies if I feel like it, and just how doing well in the system is a goal, but as you do well, you maintain that system. So I totally get, like, there's like an internal conflict. It's like I don't want to be crushed by the system, but if I do well in the system, then I'm crushing other people. So like, but is there an alternative to being crushed or crushing? And it's like there is, but it doesn't feel like it. Like it feels like as I try to become less dependent on the system, like I feel like I still am crushing myself and other people at the same time. And I don't know if that is how much that's gonna go away, but I definitely just don't have the same motivations. Like one of the goals was to like start a nonprofit, right? Like, somebody, you look around and somebody's got to fix this because it's not fucking working. Like as much as we talk about, oh, maybe things should be differently, like rarely do I hear people saying like the system is fucking crumbling now. You said that like your generation is thinking this needs to be crumbled down. It's like, no, it is already fucking crumbling. It is not working. People are not happy, whether they are the richest or the poorest. We are all fucking going through it, man. And just look around. And so I think maybe it's more or maybe a part of it is just admitting that shit is falling apart, that shit is not working, that this isn't the foolproof plan we thought it was, and that although it may feel unpleasant to admit that and to make the steps to address that, it's fucking worth it. I think about when the body gets sick, usually the symptoms get worse before they get better. And I think that we forget that also applies for other change, for other sicknesses, for other challenges. Usually it feels like it gets worse before it gets better, but just because you anticipate that it might feel worse doesn't mean that you should just avoid it. Like I would rather have my physical symptoms of a fever get worse and get through it than pretend that the symptoms that I have just don't matter, or they can't be solved, or that it's just not worth it, because that's just, I don't know, it just seems like that's also not going to be a great plan either, to avoid the getting worse part and just staying where it's like a normal level of shit. And it's like, we don't want the levels to go up because it would feel worse. And it's like, and like, how does it not feel worthwhile for things to maybe feel a little more unpleasant, if through that there's the opportunity for things to actually get better, because getting better and feeling better are two different things. I know I watched one of Ray's videos where he talks about that feeling better and getting better are not the same, and feeling better is very circular. Feeling better is like an addiction. You feel better, you're distracted, and then what inspired you to look for that distraction and feel better comes back because you never solved it. And it's not about, I don't want to say solve it, but I just mean that like it never addressed it in an authentic way. It was just a distraction, and distractions make you feel better. And we prioritize distractions, but it's but it's the opportunity is still there. No matter how discouraged or disheartened I may feel, the opportunity for change is there, and we are embodying that. And so I don't think that we need a one business or one nonprofit to solve it. It's us individually. It's us all realizing that we have more capability than we were taught to. And although we may not know exactly what needs to happen, just admitting that something, it doesn't feel right, just feels like a really meaningful step. Maybe not a great step, but it feels like just admitting that this shit is not working. This tried and tested system and this tried and tested template that we've been getting over and over to be conditioned with, that it just doesn't feel great, even if I am thriving in the system. And admitting that just feels like a meaningful step.
The first step to healing is acceptance, right? Like when you think about addiction, which is the cycle of, avoiding pain or, pursuing pleasure, even when you like deep down, that it's not good for you, but it's like you are able to distract and avoid the problem, which then makes the problem worse and bigger and doesn't make it actually go away. And then you get stuck in these cycles. And yeah, we get stuck in these cycles constantly, individually and collectively, where like we don't want to look at the root of the problem because it seems uncomfortable, right? It seems uncomfortable. And I was just thinking about that in terms of the body. Like when you think about when you have an injury, like I broke my elbow when I was younger, and it was uncomfortable as fuck for them to like move it around, x-ray it, like set it in the cast, right? And but, if I never let them do that, it wouldn't have healed right. And like I just think about that too, like if you're like in your muscles and your body, like if you have a muscle that's tight and you just avoid stretching it because it's uncomfortable and it hurts, it's going to get tighter. And I love that you brought up the difference between feeling better and getting better, because that's the biggest difference, like our unwillingness to sit in uncertainty and discomfort is what is collectively perpetuating our suffering, or at least exacerbating our suffering, or both, perpetuating and exacerbating. I think maybe suffering is inherent to the human condition. Like, we're always going to go through pain, we're going to go through discomfort. But, well, I guess maybe not suffering. Pain is inherent to the human experience. Suffering, though, at least psychological suffering, that you have some sort of agency over. Like, your perspective is what influences that feeling. And these sort of conversations where I've just been able to question the assumptions that I've held on to and like based my judgments of myself and the world on have changed my life. And it's just that little gap of being able to sit with uncertainty and just accept that as being baseline. And just like, yeah, I could, fall down the stairs and break my neck at on any given day. I could get hit by a car. It doesn't matter how much money I have. It doesn't matter how much respect I have. It doesn't matter how many followers I have. Like, that is not there's no actual security. And we're just so afraid to admit that our false security isn't actual security, even though we all know deep down it's not. And that's why people who are religious can't question their beliefs, because then their idea about their safe future in heaven with God will like go crumbling down, and then they'll be forced to sit in the reality of their life that they're aware of, whether they want to admit it or not. And it seems like it's such a scary leap to, step down off that stool of false certainty. It's like one of those situations where you think it's going to be like a big drop and you're really scared to jump off. And then you do it and you're like, oh, like that was nothing. And now I'm standing on solid ground. And that's kind of how this transition in my perspective has felt, right? Where like there was my whole life, I thought there was all of this, like, there was all of these stakes that were real, right? If I let go of my idea of myself, I thought that, or like my beliefs, like I always thought I had to, like, you know, put my stake in the ground, and like defend myself and protect myself from uncertainty. And yeah, like now that I realize, oh, I can't. It's like, okay, I thought that would be scary, but actually it's really fucking liberating. It's like the smallest shift and the hugest weight was lifted on off my shoulders. And it's just by simply having the willingness to question just a little bit. And like I didn't have to force myself to change into somebody who now like doesn't hold on to things as much, because it's not, we can't apply this mindset of striving to this conversation, that it's incompatible, right? Of just accepting uncertainty and like leaning into just what's going on and what you are and what's actually happening in reality. Like, shit just unfolds on its own. And life is so much easier when you're not creating extra drag and you're like not holding on to ideas and trying to uphold narratives about how you're a good person and you're doing the right things. And yeah, because we all could grow and change so much and do so much more than what we believe that we're capable of. And it just starts with a willingness to accept the reality of uncertainty.
Yeah, when I was trying to research, like, ways that individuals can like attempt to overcome economic and social inequalities, like the general research findings was like education and awareness and investing in yourself and community engagement and making prudent financial or making in like good financial decisions. And I'm like, okay, So I have to figure out what it is I don't know that's screwing me. But it just feels like that is not as easy to figure out when I don't know, it just seemed like the research was like, okay, well, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, right? But it's like I don't have boots. So it's a little hard to do that, you know. I'm like, okay, so do we research now buying boots or making them? Then do we research like if we're buying them, who where is it, where can I buy good boots? And if we're thinking about making them, it's like, well, how do you make them, and how do so now I have to learn how to make boots to pick myself up by my bootstraps. And it just feels like this ironic, like painfully ironic circle of a situation to be in. It's like, oh man. But I do think that there are tools that we can use to at least try to educate ourselves, because it doesn't seem like we're going to get that much help from the institutions that are in place to help us, which is ironic, right? The FDA is supposed to be in charge of making sure that the foods that we eat don't poison us, but in the US there are so many ingredients that are banned in other countries, but the FDA approves them. So you're like, okay, so you're supposed to make sure I don't eat poison, but you just approved like 17 versions of poison. So, okay, so the groups that are supposed to protect us don't always, and it's because they have people in them that just are just going through the motions in the same way that I go through the motions as an individual. Um, and so it's like, okay, well, at least there are AI tools, and I love ChatGPT Plus. Like, it's one of the best $20 that I spend every single month. And then now we have the DU Life Troubleshooter, and so that's an amazing resource that has all of the considerations that we talk about in the Dualistic Unity podcast. And every time you use it, it gets better. So if you do have ChatGPT Plus, I highly recommend, thinking about considering that as a resource. There are plenty of ways that I spend $20 on bullshit every single month. So for me, it feels like a really great tool that I can use to leverage sifting through all this information that is available to me now. And with that, I can make better informed decisions, and hopefully there is a QR code that I'm going to put up right now of the DU Life Troubleshooter. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. But just things like that, being able to leverage information so that I can use it in a way that is considerate and effective, right? Because when I'm thinking about how do I survive, um, I'm making a consideration of not screwing over other people as I do that, at least not intentionally. There's always indirect effects that you can't be aware of or avoid, but at least there's the intention to not screw over my fellow team members. As I'm like, we have all these countries and we have all these different divisions, all these separations that we create, but like I still feel like this is one either big team or one big family. We're all on earth together, and it's like, fuck, man, I argue with my family members and sometimes they piss me off, but that doesn't mean I don't love them. That doesn't mean that they're not in my family just because they piss me off, just because I piss them off. Like, get the fuck over it. Everybody that you talk to isn't supposed to be somebody that you love all the time, like, or that you're always pleased with all the time. Not that you don't love them all the time, but that you're not always pleased with them, that they're not always stroking your ego. Because I'm not looking to have a nothing but yes men around me. And in fact, I love when people challenge me and are like, you know what, I disagree, because in their disagreements is an opportunity for both of us to learn something. And in that learning, at no point do I have to admit that I didn't know or that I was wrong, or it was like, no, I just may have been inaccurate. And I don't feel so threatened when I'm inaccurate. And even when I do quote unquote something wrong, it's like, okay, well, then there's always an opportunity to do something differently. Not right, but there's always an opportunity to do things differently. And I don't take those as attacks on my ego or on my capability anymore. I'm not so easily shaken by disagreements in the way that I used to, because I used to identify with my idea. So if you question my idea, you are questioning me, and if you question me, then I don't have any value anymore. And so it just seems to be a running or a returning theme or a returning lesson, is just that, I'm not so easily threatened because I don't identify so strongly with concepts anymore. So change doesn't feel like the ultimate threat to my identity.
Yeah, there's so much growth that's possible when you recognize that the idea of yourself isn't you. And it allows you to change and grow and learn without taking shit personally, without feeling bad about yourself, without being like, oh no, but like I didn't see this before and I'm a bad person because I've been contributing to this problem. And instead of recognizing that and changing it, you're like, you can't look at it because it makes you feel bad. Like literally that is what's standing in the way of so much change and growth. Yeah, so I love that you brought up like our access to information today as well too, because it's not about pointing the finger at other people and be like, well, the billionaires need to change the system, right? The people in government need to change and be better and actually care about us, right? Like the way that you can actually do something to fix this or, at least improve your own life, right? Like for the very least, do it for yourself, right? Free yourself from your ties to all of these arbitrary identities and, you know, ideas of being a good person or like being a successful or valuable person. Like free yourself from these things that you attach to and like, you know, you attach to because they've been conditioned into you as part of this system, right? Like you just looking into things, questioning and like having the agency to use chat gpt and like research things and like figuring out what's going on for yourself and like making your own decisions rather than just trusting what authority figures are telling you, like that is real fucking change. That's change, like because you are the system, right? And as you change, everyone around you is influenced. And even if you don't necessarily see the way you're influencing other people or recognize it for what it is, like we are so much more influential than we think. And it's a win-win situation because you're freeing yourself, being more relaxed in your life, taking shit less seriously. You're able to tap into more of your potential because you're not afraid of uncertainty or failure because it doesn't mean anything about you. And also, you're a walking, living, breathing example of how living in this different way is possible. And that's so inspiring. Like every time I've met somebody who just lives that way, it's like, oh shit, you can do that. And when those people are around, like everyone around them is more relaxed and more at ease and able to be themselves more. And then we can actually work together and have productive conversations without it turning into an argument, right? Like you can disagree and through disagreement come to a better solution for everybody rather than disagreeing and then getting stuck there and just fighting because everybody's egos are involved. Like, get over yourself and look at the fucking problem. God. It's so crazy. When you
Oh.
see it for what it is, it's so obvious.
Yeah, it's I know it doesn't always feel so free. Like, so I still work a very corporate job, and so I still have to participate on these committees. I still have to do things that I don't agree with on different levels, and so I feel so out of place when I'm at work sometimes, and so I don't feel the freest because I understand that I am still participating in the things that don't make sense to me as an individual or don't make sense for us collectively, and so I feel like I am a hypocrite in a lot of ways, or I feel like I am, you know, just not doing the most because I'm still spending half of my time, and this is not exactly half, but just for the sake of the conversation, we'll say, you know, I feel like I'm spending half of my time maintaining this system and half of the time questioning the system with, you know, conversations I have with myself and things that I research on my own time and conversations that we have in the Dualistic Unity podcast and during the Patreon calls and our reels, our shows, you know, so like it just feels like I'm maintaining this because I'm spending time doing things that I don't believe in, you know, that I don't think are actually gonna work. Um, and so it's like, well, because I don't believe in it, is that also making it less effective? And so then I feel guilty about not being totally invested in the things that work. And so it's just, it doesn't always feel so great. And it doesn't feel very black and white. It feels like many shades of gray, and they don't all feel pleasant. But, you know, I'm not going to quit my job tomorrow or today. Like, I'm still going to participate in these things that I don't agree with, that don't make sense to me, because it feels like, you know, I can't sustain myself financially, you know, in the way that I can with this job. So it feels like I'm staying on this sinking ship on purpose. And I take some time to hop off the sinking ship to go to a lifeboat that feels like the conversations happening at Dualistic Unity. So how strange do I feel that I am like hopping off of a sinking boat and swimming to this life raft boat to have these conversations, and then I'm jumping off of that lifeboat to swim back to willingly get back on the sinking ship. Like, I feel crazy. I feel so crazy right now. But that's okay. Like, I have this opportunity to learn more about these things that I don't agree with while I'm there, while I'm on that ship, while I'm going to committee meetings and seeing the water rise out the windows, and I'm like, okay guys, on the agenda today is this and this, and I'm like looking at the window. And so I'm going to learn as much as I can while I'm on this sinking ship. But it definitely, I feel fucking crazy, Jackie. You know, so but it feels good to at least admit that and just be like, you know, I feel like a crazy person. Where's my straitjacket?
I completely relate to that. I know, like, it's just a balance though, because at the end of the day, you have to fucking eat. You have to eat. So, like, you can exist as, like, you know, I have to be a part of this system for now. And that also doesn't have to be like an end of the world thing. And I think it's important to remind ourselves too that although change is possible, it's likely not going to happen exactly how or as quickly as we would like, right? And so we have to navigate this gray area of like being a part of the system and then also changing it as part of it. Like the Trojan horse thing of like changing it from within. And that's honestly what keeps me motivated, or like, you know, that's a comforting thought for me when I'm like at work and I'm like, this, I just so badly wish I didn't have to do this every day. Like, wow, I wish my time was my own. I'm like, well, I'm an inside, you know, I'm what is it? An inside agent?
A double
Like
agent.
I'm a double agent, right? And I'm like changing the system from within, and that's what we're doing with DU, right? Like we're advertising on these live streams where we're talking about how the system doesn't make fucking sense and encouraging the people that we're listening to like question these things. And so like we're using the system against itself. And that's like a fun loophole that is cool to exist within, but yeah, it's like it's always a balance of knowing the context and being sensitive to your situation and not pushing so far that like you get fired and you can't pay your rent, right? Like you have to submit a little bit. And that can be humbling, but also it's good for you to be humbled. At least in my experience, like I appreciate when things don't go my way or I'm disappointed or like I'm frustrated by a situation, because that's an opportunity to learn what I was attaching to or holding on to, or realizing, oh yeah, I formed an expectation again. Silly me. Reality is completely uncertain. And then I can just sort of laugh at myself and continue on. It only seems like really arduous and end of the world when you're like, oh, the world is ending and we need to change something now. And like, I need to change everything. And people should think the same thing as me because that's egotistical as shit, right? Like, you have to be able to navigate this gray area and like empathize with the people and the structures and the systems that exist and, you know, take it as it is. Like, just have this baseline acceptance of like, yeah, right now, this is the way things are. And yeah, I guess you could say it sucks that we have to participate in this system that is a sinking ship. And like, we can see it for what it is, and it seems so fucking pointless. But also, our perspective isn't objective, our perspective isn't right. And
Mhm.
that's something that we need to be reminded of. So, you don't have to make it harder on yourself. Like, you can go to your job, do what you need to do, and then leave and not think about it anymore, right? Like, you don't have to be like, make it even shittier for yourself by being like, I hate this job constantly and like constantly ruminating about it and all the things that are happening that you don't agree with. Like, that's you just holding on to your own suffering. So, yeah, I think that's a great reminder for me and for everybody of like, just stay humble about it, but at the same time, keep questioning, keep an open mind, and like, don't let this system crush you. Like, uh, stand up for what you believe in, but at the same time, take care of yourself, right? And be patient. And the change is already happening, but it's not going to look like what you think.
Yeah. And the way that I used to think of stand up for what I believe in was to convince other people to believe in the same thing. And now the way that I interpret standing up for what I believe in is embodying it, not saying a fucking word to anybody about how I feel in particular about a certain thing, but living my perspective, living my opinion, and so that's how I stand up for what believe in, is by living it. I live what I believe in, and so many other people do that as well, but they also add converting to standing up for what they believe in, and that doesn't make your opinion a fact because you have 100 million people who agree with that opinion, and so the way that I kind of look at what I believe in is how does my life actually feel to live it? Because my life is based on the foundation of my life is my assumptions and perspectives. And so how does it feel to live those assumptions and perspective? Does it feel great? Does it feel meaningful? Or does it feel like I'm grasping at a way to deny uncertainty? Does it feel like I'm like those perspectives make me feel better, or do they actually give me opportunities to grow and to get better? And so that's how I interpret that now, because I don't want to convince anybody of anything. I do want to live a life that feels meaningful to me, and it feels more meaningful the more authentic it becomes.
Yeah, getting better isn't about getting better necessarily, like, as in you're gonna become more, right? As you're getting better. That's not what that means. It's like, in the present moment, in your present moment experience, getting better looks like, you know, not being in conflict with yourself, being authentic,
Yeah.
being aligned with what you just naturally are. And that's not belief, it's just priority. It's embodiment. It's like, you recognize something so deeply that it changes everything about you. And you're right, it's not about converting other people to believe the same things you are. It's about encouraging other people to have that authenticity as well and like be fully themselves and think for themselves. And yeah, I think this is a great place to wrap up this conversation as well. Like, with the idea of like the key to freedom is the willingness to question and think for yourself. That's all that needs to shift. Just that little thing. And then you take responsibility back for your life when you're willing to just open your perspective a little bit, because that will refine your choices, your decisions, the way you live your life, the people that you keep around you, the place you work, how you work, all the decisions that you make, the things you buy, and that's change happening. And yeah, little shameless plug here as well. While we're talking about, thinking for yourself and, you know, researching and coming to your own conclusions, Amanda and I will be holding a research and information literacy workshop coming up. The dates that are listed there are not accurate because they're in the past. Wait, that would have been tomorrow. It would have been today and tomorrow. But this workshop is actually going to probably take place sometime in March. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're going to be doing some research episodes to build up to it. But um, yeah, if you need like a little crash course about how to do research, the approach that you should have while researching, things to keep in mind, or, you just want to come and like dig into some fun topics with us, like
Yeah.
that'll be a great time. And I'm really looking forward to putting on that workshop. We're going to put a lot of our energy into it. So I'm excited and I feel very passionate about it because it's something that really gives people power. Like, we want to empower you to explore whatever you want and think freely about things and learn how to use the tools that are available to us, because like as much as the system has never really been more dominant over us as it is now, right? Like, everybody is, maybe not everybody, but the vast majority of people are struggling more than, people in the past have, and working more and like are more strapped for cash. And but at the same time, we have more power in the terms of information than we've ever had. And if
Mm-hmm.
we can learn how to harness that power,
Mm-hmm.
we're unstoppable. So yeah, I'm really excited for that workshop coming up. But this has been an amazing, amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed this. And thank you to everybody who is watching in and commenting. We appreciate you tuning in or listening after the fact. We love you. Um, Thank you for doing your part. And we'll see you next week.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Amazing chat. Definitely glad that we got into it, Jackie. Thank you so much for sharing space with me. And a final thing I'll say is just as excited as we are for the workshop and for making space to have these conversations, I would like to remind everyone that, in my opinion, we empower ourselves. And so, as much as it can feel like someone's support feels empowering, we have to agree with that to some degree. And so, just know that you empower yourself or you disempower yourself based on your perceptions and the assumptions that we make about what we can do or what we tell ourselves we can't do. And so, as much as we are encouraging you, just know that real, in my opinion, true power comes from within. So explore that more and have conversations with us if you're open to it. And we look forward to those uncomfortable but illuminating conversations. And so we'll see you guys again soon. And we appreciate you guys showing up, and you're showing up for yourselves, not to make us feel better because we don't even get to talk to you directly when we're having these lives, but you chose yourself, and we appreciate that more than words can ever say.
Yeah. Love you guys. Bye.